Cheshire here was just telling me how excited he is about the metaverse. And I asked him, Cheshire, what on earth for? And he said, well, finally I can have a machine that makes visual for me all of my magnetic imagery, all of the characters that I use in my memory palaces, and it'll manage all my memory palaces too. I don't have to raise a finger. I just put on my mask and reduce my ability to monitor the environment and catch mice and all that sort of stuff, and I'll just sit there and learn all day long. And I said, Cheshire, really, give your head a shake. I know you like to make that head of yours disappear, but don't make it disappear so much that your brain disappears at the same time. This is not what we think it is. I mean, when Zuckerberg and his Zuckerborg metamates put out the video for the metaverse, what did they do? They showed us a bunch of people who are playing cards with one another. Now, what? Playing cards with one another? I mean, maybe after years of forced separation, that might be an attractive thing to do in a digital environment. But the point is that he has reproduced the most mundane activity amongst friends in the digital environment, which is exactly what a metaverse online world is all going to do. It's only going to reproduce what we already have, but it's going to do it in a way that you could think of, as John Michael Greer often puts it, having prosthetic imagination. Rather than you exercising your imagination, you are going to have the exercise done to you in order for you to look at bells and whistles and ads and have all your data tracked at a whole new level so that you can have less and less thinking encouraged and more thinking produced and channeled in a particular direction at the whims of corporations. So, metaverse, yawn, and snore till the end of the universe. What I want is something more like what you would call a paracosm. And a paracosm is a very interesting way of thinking about what we do in memory palaces, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're new here, get subscribed and hit that thumbs up. I always love when you guys support the channel with that and leave your comments. And you know, in this battle against the robots, it doesn't really help much to type for the algorithm. You know the robots know that. What better way to show them that you're paying attention to their evil game than to pump in something meaningless? Let's have a real conversation, and I always appreciate those in-depth posts that you make on these videos. I know our community is small, but let's hope that we double it in this year. All right, so what is a paracosm? Well, we can think of the word para first, which is, before, beside, etc., maybe over something. So it is a cosm, a universe that is beside us somehow, and it is filled with fantastical references and characters. But another way of thinking about it is it's the universe inside us. So when I'm using memory techniques and I'm using magnetic imagery inside of my memory palaces, maybe I'm using Cheshire. Where is Cheshire? Is he sitting on my piano? Well, yes, but where's my piano? Well, the piano is in the room, but where is the room? And the more we think about it, well, I don't want to get into things like solipsism, not even hard or soft solipsism, but at the end of the day, it's all being processed here in the universe of the chemical bath of the brain. So that means that I can think about Cheshire, where he is right here, and he's a character in my paracosm, and I can link him now to something else that I might need to memorize. I can just think of the actual figure in the paracosm and place it in that place and weave it together so that if I want to remember it, I can revisit it strategically to get it into long-term memory. So the idea of para being beside or above and all that sort of stuff, I think it's a universe within your mind, and you have carefully crafted it and nurtured it to become vibrant and useful on demand when you're learning information. It is not a prosthetic imagination, but it is a cultured and deeply organic and original to you act of imagination that you can build and build through multiple forms of connection. Many of our favorite authors have been building paracosms for a very long time. C.S. Lewis with Narnia has built a paracosm with Aslan and all kinds of wonderful characters that live in that universe. And then when we read those books, we then absorb those characters, and if you ever use memory techniques, then you could use Aslan to help you remember something else. And you could potentially use the world of Narnia as a memory palace, or you could just transport those characters into the room with you. And if you had to memorize anything for which Aslan would be useful, you could just place it on a bookshelf or place it in a corner, etc., and weave them together. But the more fictional references that you have, the more you're going to be able to make those connections. And often authors are helping us make those connections in really interesting ways. So Michael Connelly, for example, I'm a big fan of his crime novels, and one of his detectives is named Hieronymus Bosch. Now, what is he doing there? That is a painter, right? And he's helping us understand the world of crime that he talks about in his world by giving that name, this vast landscape of strange and twisted, torturous landscapes, right? This is just an amazing way of drawing two paracosms together, the one that Connelly is building in his novels and the ones that already exist in the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch. And, he talks about other paintings and he talks about jazz and so forth. And all of those references, to the extent that you are tracking those references and you take a moment to think about them, they are in your paracosm. They are built by you as you self-consciously reflect upon the associations, as opposed to jacking into a metaverse and somehow having it done for you, which the consequences of are not going to be something that I think our species wants. We're already feeling all of the pressure and the problems that come when things are dictated to us and we are pressured to move in particular ways. And we are so blind to how it's happening that we even willingly have been tricked into adopting it. Growth hacking is behind a lot of that. But anybody can choose the books they want to read and think about the paracosm that the author is building and follow those chains of associations and very, very naturally and freely develop them and take them in all kinds of ways of your own volition. And this is what the magnetic memory method is about, is peering inside of yourself, finding all of those connections, and then taking the information that you need to memorize, the most important information that actually improves your life so that you might help improve the lives of others, and then weaving it together with the paracosms in your mind so that you remember that information, and not only remember it, but you remember it when you need it, and you're able to act upon it and use it or draw upon its wisdom, whatever that information might be. Whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or a philosopher or a teacher, you're able to get it or get at least as close to it as possible and then use it to transform the world. It's the closest thing to real magic that I've ever known. So, how can you build a paracosm of your own strategically so that it is effective and leads to efficiency very, very quickly? The number one way to do this is just a very simple exercise. Get out a piece of paper and write down the letters A to Z, and then start to think, what characters do I know that I can build into my paracosm with quicker reference and just use the alphabet as my guide? So A for Aslan. Maybe you want to do a musical paracosm, so your A is going to be Axl Rose, right? You can do multiple paracosms that are category specific. And the more you think categorically, the more you can use the conceptual mode of all the magnetic modes that I talk about in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. Now, as you go through this, you can do it on paper, and I suggest you do it on paper first because a lot of people's imaginations are broken. And this is that kind of prosthetic imagination that I think is a good way to help you develop the ability to do it on your own. So a piece of paper is not necessarily prosthetic imagination in the way that John Michael Greer means it, but it is a prosthesis paper, and so is a pen. It's an extension of our human mind that allows us to interact physically with the world and then help train our brain to think faster. So as quickly as you can, just think, fictional characters for my paracosm. Let's go. A, Aslan. B, Batman. C, Cookie Monster. D, Dracula. E, Ernie from Sesame Street. And so on. And then you get to maybe a hard letter like X, and you might think, well, I can't think of anyone, what am I going to do? You could think categorically. You could think of X-Men, for example. Or maybe you just leave it blank, but come back to it later and allow yourself to reflect. If you're not overly sensitive and immediately enraged by thinking about politicians, you can have a politician's paracosm. So, you can think through A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Barack Obama. C, and you just start to think through there. And for myself, it's just kind of a stretch sometimes. Who can I think that's a politician whose name starts with C? And you just think through all of these things, and it stretches your mind and builds your imagination. And it's so powerful, because then when you're using your memory techniques and you're in your memory palace and you've got really hard information that you need to memorize, you don't have to think so hard about associations, because you've practiced the game of association in advance. Not relegating it to a machine, not putting a mask on your eyes so you're not able to see the environment around you, which is not necessarily part of human evolution. And I don't know where humanity is going to evolve when we make it part of our evolution, which we are increasingly encouraged to do. We really want, if we're going to survive, you and I, we want to have our imagination as strong and robust and quick and snappy as possible, so that we're able to complete tasks as quickly as possible and in the most wise ways possible. Notice too that there are many, many health benefits from doing this. Moshe Bar talks about this in Mind Wandering, and very, very much encourages us to be exploratory in our mind wandering so that we're able to get mood lifting benefits. So there's every reason under the sun to be using this, not just to learn faster and remember more, but to feel better. And even though you can get the benefits of feeling better, it also may sometimes stretch you. And being stretched and thinking in ways that are unusual don't always feel great. But that itself is an interesting point. And so I was reading Infinite Jest recently, which, Robert, thank you very much for suggesting this. Robert's in our larger Magnetic Memory Method community and specific programs like Read with Momentum. And this has been a very, very interesting read so far. I'm not done yet, but on page 83, I think it gives us something that is very, very important. So if you'll give me some radio silence, I'll look at page 83, and let me know in the comments if you would like me to share on the YouTubes. Maybe if we get 100,000 subscribers in this calendar year, we will have a full walkthrough of the Magnetic Memory Method bookmark technique. But on page 83 here, it says, by learning in Palestra the virtues that pay off directly in competitive games, the well-disciplined boy begins assembling the more abstract, gratification-delaying skills necessary for being a team player in a larger arena. Right? So this Palestra, this is, I believe, the ancient Greek word for the school where you would learn to wrestle. Right? And this needing to become a real team player. A real team player where? Lost in fantasy places or in the world with each other. I don't necessarily mean to say that our digital environments are not the world, but we're still going to need to go through struggles in the virtual world or in the real world, no matter what, to become our best possible selves. And we're going to need our imaginations to be as robust as possible. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't enjoy digital environments. Far from it. I like the internet as much as anybody else. I obviously use the internet myself. I try to do so in the best possible ways with the greatest morality and concern for human imagination. But you should also know, one of my MAs, my second MA, is in media and communications. And even back when I did that in 2007 to 2009, there was very, very deep concerns about what was going on in some of these corporate backrooms that we never see, and their plans to create zero latency in order for us to not think about what we're doing online, but just keep going with the flow. And we're given a command and an action, and then we just act. And this is not good. This means that our critical thinking skills have gone down. They've gone down incredibly. And also, the internet involves a lot of repetition. And the emphasis has been on optimizing the machines for not just any kind of repetition, but rote repetition. Rote repetition, I have shown you on a previous video, rote repetition has been shown to reduce critical thinking skills. But what we do in the magnetic memory method world is we do creative repetition, which means much, much less repetition in order to learn, and it uses all of our critical thinking faculties, and it does so because we're thinking deeply about the connections, not in the metaverse, but in the paracosm. If you want more information about those problems in the reduction of critical thinking, watch my video on rote learning next.